Peter Dutton is really on a tear at the moment. Timu Trump is spending so much time sucking the oxygen out of Australian politics, it's hard to find time to look at much else right now. So let's take a look at his latest brain fart. Peter Dutton announced that if he becomes PM, then he'd pursue a referendum in order to amend the Australian Constitution to allow government ministers to strip dual citizens of their Australian citizenship if they commit serious crimes.
Do you really want to send voters to another referendum poll?
Well, Nat, I want to keep our country safe. That's the first priority, and it's the first responsibility of any Prime Minister. And at the moment, we've got people in our country who hate our country, who want to cause terrorist attacks. And my argument is that if you betray your allegiance to our country in that way, you should expect to lose your citizenship. We would never grant somebody citizenship if we knew that they were going to undertake a terrorist act. And somebody who signs the Pledge of Allegiance to our country and then breaks it in such an overt way, or is involved in child pedophilia, for argument's sake, I believe that the community standard demands that people who don't abide by our laws and don't respect fellow Australians and want to harm women and children, I just don't think that they deserve priority. We've got millions of people who want to come to our country who are good people, and we have a great migrant story in our country, but if we want to keep ourselves safe, we need to make sure that the laws reflect the community values. And I think there are a lot of Australians at the moment who are worried about the rise of anti-Semitism and what we've seen in our country and elsewhere, which just doesn't reflect the values that we've fought for.
I guess if there's one thing we should all be able to acknowledge at this point, it's that asking questions around a Dutton brain fart and then expecting answers, that's really a fool's errand. In a doorstop in Perth, given the opportunity to clarify his position, he said that we will be seeking a mandate at the next election from the Australian people to keep Australians safe and to make communities safer than what they currently are. Not exactly hosing down the referendum talk. His referendum stink cloud hadn't even hung in the air for 24 hours before his own colleagues started walking it way back.
Coalition divided. Liberal Senator Michaelia Cash ruling it out.
Yesterday, the opposition leader was making the case for a referendum to give the government absolute power to deport criminals who are dual citizens, drawing a mixed response from colleagues.
This is not our policy.
Frontbenchers appear to play down the plan.
We said we'll consider all options. We've been absolutely clear on that.
While a Liberal candidate suggested it wasn't a hot topic in Tasmania.
Nobody's talking about this here.
Anyway, let's try our best to look at what he's pitching and unpack it a little, because it won't take long to realise that this whole thing is unnecessary performative nonsense. So Dutton would hold a referendum in order to amend the Australian Constitution to allow government ministers to strip dual citizens of their Australian citizenship if they commit serious crimes. The first and obvious question is why? I mean, don't we have laws that would allow courts to do that already? The answer is yes. Yes, we do. Courts currently have the power to strip citizenship from people where they are found to have committed serious offences, which in and of itself makes Dutton's brain fart entirely unnecessary. So with that major point out of the way, we have to ask, what's Dutton on about? I guess Dutton isn't happy with those powers resting with the courts. You know, courts, the things that democratic societies rely on to hand out justice. No, Dutton wants politicians to be able to hand out their own justice. Maybe he wants to cosplay as Judge Dredd or something. He's essentially wanting to do away with the separation of powers, the separation of powers, the thing that keeps the functions of government and the judicial functions of the courts separate, Separation of powers, also known as one of the cornerstones of a democratic society. At the moment, the Constitution outlines that it's only the courts that can slap penalties on people and impose punishment. Peter Dutton is proposing that we give politicians that similar level of power, and that really should be chilling for people. I mean, if you want Australia to become an authoritarian state where the government of the day has unfettered power, that'd be a good starting point. His referendum would be about shifting the country away from democracy more toward the autocratic end of the government spectrum. There'll be people thinking, yeah, but this wouldn't affect me, so why should I care? Well, here's the thing. Australia is home to a lot of dual citizens. According to the last census, just over 30% of Australia's population was born overseas. More than that, almost half the Australian population have at least one parent that was born overseas. It's thought that at least 1/3 of the Australian population are dual citizens.
I point out that about 1/3 of Australians have dual citizenship.
Hell, if you're watching this video, there's a chance that you're a dual citizen without even realising it. I mean, just look, around election time, it's fairly common to find a couple of political hopefuls that are dual citizens and therefore ineligible for election. Given the number of dual citizens in the country, even if you're not a dual citizen yourself, there's a good chance that one of your mates probably is. So this change would have the capacity to impact a huge number of Australians. Then the exact nature of what Dutton views as a serious crime is yet to be fleshed out, as is the standard when it comes to a Dutton brain fart.
At the moment, we've got people in our country who hate our country, who want to cause terrorist attacks, and my argument is that if you betray your allegiance to our country in that way, you should expect to lose your citizenship.
I mean, he says terrorism, but what exactly does that cover? Does it include his latest hobby horse, anti-Semitism, for example? Based on recent comments Dutton has made, you'd presume that it would.
Peter Dutton would reportedly consider a referendum on the deportation of anti-Semitic visa holders. Under an opposition proposal, visa holders convicted of hate speech and hate-related crimes could be deported if Section 501 powers were extended.
But what does anti-Semitism look like in Dutton's mind? So given how well thought out Dutton's latest brain fart seems to be, who really knows who'd be in the firing line? For example, you're born in Australia, your mum's born in New Zealand. You're a dual citizen. If you speak out on the horrors occurring overseas and these views don't align with the Dutton government, could that be construed as hate speech? Would describing the destruction occurring in Gaza as genocide, for example, be considered anti-Semitic under the Dutton regime? And what happens then? Who draws the line? Who defines the line? If Dutton hopes to sweep up votes from the freedom and libertarian crowd, proposing that the government be provided authoritarian powers, that might not be the way to go about it. And then there's the question of who's going to pay for this referendum? And the answer to that is that we will, taxpayers. As he liked to remind everyone during the last referendum, these things are expensive.
And the trouble is the PM at the moment's going to spend about $450 million to pose a question on October 14 that he knows is going to fail.
Well, I say to Peter Dutton, where's the detail, baby? Where's the detail? Come on, fair go.
If Dutton was serious about government efficiency, spending $500 million on his brain fart doesn't seem all that efficient to me. And don't forget, if we happen to find ourselves on an even darker timeline and Dutton's in the big chair, we could well suffer from referendum burnout, because his immigration referendum isn't the only one on his dance card should he become PM. Because remember, he has already promised to hold a referendum on Indigenous recognition in his first term, if he's able to form government. But then again, the way he's going, I'm not sure Dutton has announced a policy that he hasn't eventually walked back. So then why is he bringing this up now? I mean, who can really say what's rattling around in that old noggin? But I reckon it's fair to say that Pistol Pete has had a bad run lately.
Annus horribilis.
In the past few weeks, with an election getting closer, he's started to come under a little bit of scrutiny. I mean, still a fraction of the scrutiny you'd expect of a would-be PM, but scrutiny nonetheless. And the reality is Dutton hasn't handled that well. Peter Dutton would view immigration issues as one of maybe his only strength. Never mind that reality wouldn't appear to justify his confidence, but he'd be feeling like making a noise about an issue like this gives him an opportunity to portray strength and something to talk about to draw attention away from his various other foot and mouth tin ear moments.
My God, if that doesn't ring a guilty red flag bell, I don't know what does.
I think that Amy Ramikis is pretty spot on here. The referendum isn't a serious idea. I'd also say that it's a callback for the Trumpists. To be honest, I feel like I've spent a lot of time looking at stuff Peter Dutton has done and said lately, and I'm finding myself a little bit torn. On the one hand, some of the stuff he's coming out with, the minuscule nuggets of would-be policy, is so stupid that perhaps talking about it might risk giving it some credibility. But on the flip side, I think that perhaps ignoring it might just do the same. I mean, take this particular brain fart as an example. It's stupid and it's unnecessary, but on the surface it may sound okay to some people. It may even make sense. But once you scratch away at the surface, even if just a little, you soon realise that there's really nothing there but hot air, wind.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.